My name is Rachel Morgan, and I am 33 years old. For most of my life, I thought a smile meant safety. I thought if my family smiled at me, everything was fine. No matter how heavy my chest felt, no matter how confused or small I felt inside, their smiles told me I was imagining things. Smiles meant love. Smiles meant approval. Smiles meant I belonged. That belief nearly destroyed me. My family smiled through everything. They smiled at breakfast. They smiled during holidays. They smiled when other people were around. They smiled when they talked about me, to me, and eventually around me. Those smiles were calm, practiced, and convincing. Anyone looking in would have thought I was lucky to be surrounded by such warmth. What no one saw was what happened underneath those smiles. I started noticing it slowly. The kind of slow that makes you doubt yourself. Comments that sounded harmless but stayed with me longer than they should have. Decisions made without me, then explained with a smile. Laughter that didn't quite include me, followed by reassurance that I was overthinking. Every time something felt wrong, I looked at their faces. And because they were smiling, I told myself I must be the problem. That's how quiet damage begins. No one ever yelled at me. No one openly rejected me. Instead, they corrected me gently. They joked about my sensitivity. They smiled when they told me I worried too much. They smiled when they dismissed my concerns. They smiled when they changed plans and forgot to tell me. They smiled when they talked about things I was no longer part of. Those smiles trained me to stay quiet. I learned that reacting made things uncomfortable. Asking questions made things awkward. Expressing hurt ruined the mood. So I adjusted. I laughed when they laughed. I nodded when they explained things away. I smiled back, even when my stomach felt tight and my heart felt confused. I didn't realize then that I was being taught my place. The most painful part is that I trusted them completely. I defended them when others questioned our closeness. I told people my family was supportive, loving, close. I truly believed it, because believing it was safer than facing the truth. Behind those smiles, things were changing. Information stopped reaching me. Conversations ended when I entered rooms. Stories didn't line up anymore. When I noticed, I was met with the same calm reaction every time. A smile, a sigh, a suggestion that I was reading too much into things. They made it feel silly to question them. And because they were family, because they smiled, because nothing looked wrong on the surface, I turned that doubt inward. I started questioning my memory, my reactions, my emotions. I wondered if I really was difficult, if I really was too sensitive, if something was wrong with me. That's what makes smiling cruelty so dangerous. It doesn't attack you directly. It rewrites you quietly. I felt myself shrinking in real time. I chose words carefully. I softened my opinions. I stopped bringing up things that mattered to me. I learned how to be agreeable without being present, how to exist without taking up space. And still, the smiles continued. They smiled while they made plans without me. They smiled while they spoke for me. They smiled while they decided what I could handle. They smiled while my life slowly moved out of my own hands. The damage wasn't obvious at first. It showed up in small cracks. Anxiety I couldn't explain. Sleepless nights. A constant feeling of being off balance. I felt like I was always about to be corrected. Always one step behind. Always the last to know. Whenever I tried to talk about it, I was met with concern instead of accountability. They asked if I was okay, if I was stressed, if something else was going on in my life. The focus always shifted back to me. Their smiles never changed. That's how I missed what they were doing behind my back. While I was trying to fix myself, they were building a story about me. Quietly, calmly, collectively. A story where I was the problem. The sensitive one. The dramatic one. The one who took things the wrong way. I didn't hear it directly at first. I felt it in the way people started treating me. The caution. The distance. The politeness that replaced warmth. My name started to feel different when it was spoken, like it carried a warning with it. And still, they smiled at me like nothing was wrong. That's what hurts the most now. Looking back and realizing how much effort it took to keep those smiles in place, while my life was quietly being rearranged without my consent. Opportunities I wasn't told about, decisions I wasn't included in, conversations that shaped my future, happening without me. I thought family would never do that. I thought family would at least tell me the truth. Instead, they smiled and let me believe everything was fine while my confidence eroded. My voice weakened, and my sense of self slowly slipped away. They smiled while I blamed myself for damage I didn't cause. They smiled while I carried confusion that belonged to them. By the time I sensed how deep it went, I was already doubting my own instincts. And when you don't trust yourself, you become easy to manage, easy to silence, easy to move out of the way. That was the moment I didn't recognize yet. But my life was already being quietly ruined. Not with cruelty anyone could point to, but with smiles that told the world everything was normal. At first, nothing exploded. That's why it took me so long to understand what was happening. The actions behind my back didn't reveal themselves dramatically. They slipped out slowly, like cracks you only notice once the damage is already deep. A comment here, a reaction there, a pause that lasted too long, a detail that didn't quite match the story I'd been told. I told myself I was being paranoid. Because when the people around you keep smiling, suspicion feels like betrayal on your part. The first sign came through conversations that felt incomplete. I would hear about plans after they had already happened. Decisions that somehow involved me but were made without me. When I asked simple questions, the answers were vague, overly calm, and strangely rehearsed. They always ended with the same reassurance. Don't worry about it. It's nothing. You're reading too much into this. And they smiled while saying it. That smile made me second-guess myself every time. Then I started noticing how often my name came up when I wasn't there. Not directly. Not in a way anyone would openly admit. I could feel it in the way conversations shifted when I entered a room. In the way explanations suddenly became shorter. In the way people spoke more carefully around me, like they were choosing words they had already practiced. It felt like I was late to a meeting everyone else had attended without me. One moment stays with me clearly. Someone mentioned a conversation I knew I hadn't been part of. When I asked when it happened, there was a pause, a quick look exchanged, then a smile. The explanation came easily, too easily, as if the answer had been prepared in advance. That was the first time my stomach dropped. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't react emotionally. I just listened. And the more I listened, the more I realized how much information I wasn't getting anymore. Things that used to be shared freely were now filtered, edited, softened. I was being managed. Behind my back, conversations were happening about me, not with me. I didn't know exactly what was being said, but I could feel the effect of it. People treated me differently. With caution, with politeness that felt distant, with concern that wasn't concern at all. When I finally heard one small piece of the truth, it didn't come as a confession. It came as a slip. Someone assumed I already knew something. When I didn't respond the way they expected, they froze. Then they corrected themselves quickly, covering it with laughter and a smile. But the damage was done. I realized there was a version of events circulating that I had never been included in. That's when fear replaced confusion. Because confusion makes you question yourself. Fear makes you realize something is being hidden from you. I started replaying past interactions in my head. Moments that felt off but I had dismissed. Times I felt excluded but blamed myself. Suddenly, those memories rearranged themselves into a pattern I didn't want to see. They weren't just forgetting me. They were deciding for me. I noticed how often others spoke on my behalf, how my reactions were described instead of heard, how my feelings were summarized instead of respected. When I tried to clarify, I was met with smiles that felt patient, almost sympathetic, like I was the one who didn't understand. And the more I tried to stay calm and reasonable, the more it seemed to confirm whatever story was being told about me behind closed doors. If I spoke up, I was emotional. If I stayed quiet, I was distant. Either way, the narrative didn't change. That's when I realized the truth. The smiling wasn't just hiding the damage, it was protecting it, because smiles make everything look harmless. They make manipulation look like concern. They make exclusion look accidental. They make control look like care. And because this was my family, because I trusted them, because I wanted to believe they would never intentionally hurt me, I kept giving them the benefit of the doubt. That benefit was costing me my reality. The behind-the-back actions grew bolder over time. I felt it in the way boundaries were crossed without discussion. In the way decisions affecting my life were announced instead of discussed. In the way I was expected to adjust without complaint. Whenever I hesitated, the smiles returned. Gentle reminders. Calm explanations. Soft warnings about being difficult. Each one delivered with warmth, like they were helping me, not controlling me. I started doubting my instincts. I wondered if this was just how families worked. If maybe I was too sensitive. If maybe I was imagining disrespect where none existed. That doubt kept me quiet longer than anything else could have. But once you start noticing behind-the-back actions, you can't stop seeing them. I caught inconsistencies more easily. I noticed when stories changed depending on who was listening. I noticed how often my absence made things easier for everyone else. And I noticed how quickly smiles returned whenever I stopped asking questions. That's when I understood something terrifying. The truth wasn't meant for me. They didn't want me informed. They wanted me compliant. They wanted me calm, agreeable, and unaware. Because awareness would disrupt the balance they had created. And that balance required my silence. The moment I truly accepted that, the smiles started to look different. They no longer felt comforting. They felt strategic. Like a signal that everything was under control, as long as I didn't interfere. I was standing inside a life that was slowly being directed by other people, and I was the last one allowed to know. That realization didn't make me angry right away. It made me cold. Because if my family could smile at me while quietly deciding things that reshaped my life, then the problem wasn't miscommunication. It was intent. And once intent enters the picture, nothing stays accidental anymore. I didn't confront them yet, but I knew I was getting close. Because the more they tried to keep things hidden behind smiles, the more determined I became to finally see what they never wanted me to see. The betrayal didn't announce itself. It revealed itself in a way that made my hands go cold before my mind could catch up. It started with a decision that affected my life directly. Something important. Something that should have involved me. I heard about it casually, in passing, like it was old news. The way someone mentions the weather. When I asked what they meant, the room went quiet for half a second too long. Then came the smiles. They explained it like it had already been settled, like it had been discussed thoroughly, like everyone had agreed. Everyone except me. I remember nodding slowly while my heart pounded, trying to understand how something so personal could happen without my voice ever being part of the conversation. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't miscommunication. It was exclusion. I asked when this decision had been made. The answer changed depending on who I asked. One person said it came up recently. Another said it had been discussed for a while. Someone else said they thought I already knew. Each version was delivered calmly, confidently, with that same familiar smile. Nothing matched. That's when the fear turned into clarity. Behind my back, they hadn't just been talking about me. They had been planning, coordinating, agreeing. My life had become something they felt entitled to arrange without me, and they felt comfortable doing it because they believed I wouldn't push back. And they were right, at least at first. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse anyone of betrayal. I asked questions. Simple ones. Who decided this? Why wasn't I included? How long had this been discussed? Each question was met with reassurance instead of answers, concern instead of accountability. They told me not to worry. They told me it was for the best. They told me they were just trying to help, and they smiled while saying it. That smile made me feel childish for questioning them. It made me doubt whether I was being unreasonable. It made me hesitate long enough for the moment to pass, which is exactly what they needed. Later, I learned there was more. The decision wasn't the only thing that had happened behind my back. Money had been discussed too, not in the dramatic sense of theft, but in a quieter, more humiliating way. They had been talking about what I could afford, what I should contribute, what I was responsible for, without ever asking me. Assumptions were made, numbers were shared, conclusions were drawn. I was being treated like a resource, not a person. When I found out, it wasn't because someone told me honestly. It slipped out accidentally. A comment that assumed my agreement. A reference to something I hadn't approved. When I paused, confused, they backtracked quickly, smiling, explaining, minimizing. They acted like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing, because behind those conversations was a deeper betrayal. They had been shaping how others saw me, describing my reactions, framing my behavior, explaining my feelings for me. By the time I heard pieces of it, a version of me already existed in their minds. A version that made their actions seem reasonable. They said I was sensitive. They said I stressed easily. They said it was better not to involve me too much. Those words didn't sound cruel on their own, but together, they erased my credibility. They made it easy to decide things without me, because I had already been labeled as someone who would react poorly. That's when my reputation started to shift. I felt it in the way people spoke to me differently. Carefully, politely, like they were managing me. I felt it in the way my opinions were softened or redirected. In the way people checked my reactions before continuing, like they were bracing for impact. All of it had been built quietly, while I was smiling back and trusting them. I tried to defend myself once. Just once. I said I felt excluded. I said I should have been part of the decision. I said it hurt to find out this way. I didn't accuse anyone of betrayal. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke calmly, because I knew anything else would be used against me. The response was immediate. They told me I was overthinking. They told me I was making it bigger than it was. They told me I should be grateful they cared enough to handle things. And once again, they smiled. That was the moment it clicked. The betrayal wasn't just the decision, or the money, or the way they talked about me. It was the assumption that I didn't deserve agency over my own life. They had decided that for me. I realized then how carefully everything had been done. No arguments. No visible conflict. Just enough information withheld. Just enough reassurance given. Just enough smiling calm to keep me doubting myself instead of them. My life hadn't been ruined in one dramatic moment. It had been quietly redirected. And I had been standing inside it the entire time, believing I was part of the process, when in reality I was the last to know. That realization hit harder than anger ever could. Because anger gives you energy. Clarity takes it away first. I sat with that clarity for a long time, replaying every moment I had ignored. Every time something felt off and I let it go because they smiled. Every time I told myself family wouldn't do that to me. They did. Not loudly. Not cruelly. But deliberately. That was the concrete betrayal. Not one action, but a pattern. Not one lie, but a system. And once I saw it, I knew there was no way to unsee it. No way to pretend this was accidental. No way to go back to believing the smiles meant safety. The question wasn't whether they had betrayed me anymore. The question was what I was going to do now that I finally understood the truth.